All right, we finally get to write some Rust. To do that, we have to create a new project. As we remember, we can do that using cargo new. We just need a name for our project. So what we are building here is a calculator for our weight on Mars. So let's just name it Mars Calc. Nice and simple. Cargo will go ahead and create this for us. So now we can go to this directory. As you can see here, I'm currently on Rust version 1.42. That's just for reference. And we can also use cargo to run our new project. And we can see that everything compiles successfully and it outputs a nice hello world here. That means that everything works fine so far. So now let's open our cool new project in Visual Studio Code. We can do that from here. Let me just move that to another workspace. All right, so this is our new project. It is pretty simple at the moment. It only contains a single file called main.rs. So here is the line of code that outputs our hello world. So let's actually dissect this and figure out exactly what's going on. On top here, we can see that we have a function called main. So the way we declare functions in Rust is by using the fn keyword. So to declare a new function, we use the fn keyword followed by the name of the function, followed by brackets, and then we put the body of the function inside of curly brackets. So nothing very interesting here, like very similar to most other programming languages. So what is interesting though is this main function. So the main function is actually a special Rust function. It is always the first code that runs in a Rust executable. So it is the entry point to our program, right? And another interesting thing about functions in Rust is that Rust code uses snake case as the conventional naming style for functions and variable names. So snake case just means that all letters are lowercase and underscores separate the words. So what we are building here is a calculator that's going to calculate our weight on Mars. So let's create the function that's actually going to do this. So we want to name our function calculate our weight on Mars. Pretty simple. And we put the brackets and we put the curly brackets. So this is the naming convention for functions in Rust. All right, so functions can also accept parameters, something that you can do in most languages. And we put the parameters between the braces after the name of the function. Our function in this case has to receive our weight on Earth, so it can go ahead and convert that to our weight on Mars. So here we would just put weight and hopefully that would work. But in Rust, the function signatures should always specify the type of each parameter. So here we can just type weight. We have to specify exactly what data type it's going to be. And this is necessary because as you remember, for the compiler to know how big the stack frame will be for each function, it has to know the size of every variable that's going to live in this stack frame. So here we have to specify a type for our weight. So how we specify a type for a parameter, we just put a colon after the name of the parameter, and then here we can specify the type. So in our case, we want our weight to be a floating point number, so we get some nice precision, so we can just type F32. F32 is just a 32-bit floating point number. Okay, so the last missing piece for our calculate function here is its return type. So we pass it our weight and we expect it to return our weight on Mars. So the way we specify a return type in Rust is by putting an arrow after the function declaration here, and then here we can specify the return type of our function. So in this case, we pass in F32 and we would expect the function to return an F32. So that's how our function would look. We can see that the compiler complains because it is expecting an F32 as the return type, but it finds nothing. So here we can, just to make it happy, we can type return, let's say 50 like this. So now the compiler should be happy. We have our function. It only complains that the function is never used, but we'll fix that in a minute. Rust also has a very cool feature for returning from functions. The last expression in every function that doesn't have a semicolon at the end is automatically returned without the need to type the return keyword before it. So that sounds a bit weird, so let's actually see it in action. So if we just delete the return keyword and we remove the semicolon at the end, so right now this value here, like this entire row, whatever it is, will be just implicitly returned. This is a bit weird, but once you get used to it, it is a very, very nice feature of the language. We can still use the return keyword to return early from functions, but in most cases we will be using this approach. Okay, now that we have implemented our function, all we have left to do is actually call it. So we can come here in the main function, and calling functions in Rust is very similar to calling functions in pretty much any other programming language. We just type the name of the function, and between the brackets we pass the parameter that we want. So right now we've called our function, the compiler is happy. We can go back to our console and check if Cargo will actually build our code, and we can see that it does. It throws some warnings about unused variables, but we will fix that shortly. So in the next lecture, we will discuss this weird print line call that has an exclamation mark at the end.